Okay, good. Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, April 10, 2025, 7:32 a.m., and this is the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We have a somewhat shorter agenda than normal, but some important work to be done this morning. As Director Bennerat, I think, mentioned earlier, that these meetings are being done on a hybrid sort of basis. What that means is that people can both appear in the chambers or they can listen online in a variety of different ways, and there'll be one opportunity this morning to call in. If they have a matter of concern to them, they can call in on community comment. The information's on the screen as to the sequence for calling. And if you have something that you want to talk to the HRA about that's not on the agenda today or scheduled for a future public hearing, those are the only two exceptions to your comments. Otherwise, we welcome the comments. Having provided that information, let's call the meeting to order. And Scott Neal, our Executive Director and City Manager, will call the roll.
Commissioner Risser.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here. Commissioner
Pierce. Here. Commissioner Agnew is absent. Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. And we've got a meeting agenda that was published both to the members of the HRA and the general public. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to modify the agenda in any form or fashion or from a staff standpoint? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Pierce seconds the adoption of the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the meeting agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The meeting agenda is adopted, and now we are at community comment. And I don't see anyone in the audience. We've got one matter here that the folks in the audience are here on. And do we have anybody online?
Do not yet have anyone on the line. Because there is a short delay in the broadcast, I would recommend we wait 1 minute before moving forward with the meeting. My clock shows it at 7:33. I'll come back to you at 7:34 or when I have a caller, whichever is first.
All right, very good.
It's now been a minute and I still don't have a caller, so I think it's safe for you to move forward with the agenda.
All right. Thank you, Director Bennerat. Our practice is that when we do have community comment, the following meeting, the Executive Director responds to those community comments. I don't know if there are any to respond to or not.
We didn't have any at our last HRA meeting.
Thank you. Next is the adoption of the consent agenda. There's a couple of items on the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to move the adoption of the items on the consent agenda or remove an item from the consent agenda?
I will move the consent agenda.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
All right, Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Pierce seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those items on the consent agenda are adopted. And we're going to the heart of the meeting now this morning, which is in the reports and recommendations portion of the meeting. And that has to do with a singular item we have to address this morning, and that is a potential agreement to amend the loan agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce that was made during the COVID era, and our economic development director, not our executive director, our economic development director has this matter this morning. Bill Neuendorf. Bill, welcome.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. As you noted, this proposal does date back to a project that was first started in the discussion phase during the pandemic years. So the recommendation this morning is to approve an amendment to the loan agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce. This loan was first issued back in 2022 with the intention of remodeling a vacant commercial space to better serve the needs of the business community.
Oh, Buhl was on the consent. Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
That's right. So I was mentioning that this loan was first issued back in 2022 with the intention of remodeling a vacant commercial space to better serve the needs of the business community. In short, unfortunately, that project was, while it was built, it was not able to secure sustainable funding to keep operations ongoing. And the Business Innovation Lab, which was the subject of the loan primarily, did close earlier this year. We discussed that at an earlier meeting. Despite this setback, the Chamber of Commerce does have the full intention to repay the outstanding loan balance. However, they are seeking a modification of the repayment terms to avoid undue hardship to their ongoing operations. I mentioned that this idea dated back to 2020, 2021, and then finally an agreement in 2022. There were a number of meetings that were held to discuss this initial concept. As per our typical process with these types of arrangements, we had some early discussions. Staff put together a term sheet to see what might work for the chamber and what might work for the HRA, and eventually that led to a loan agreement. The lab and the remodel was finished in 2023, and the operations of the lab did begin at that point, and the chamber still does occupy the space. So just to make sure that we get that on the record. Ultimately, a loan of approximately $650,000 was issued. Repayment of that loan started in early 2024, and the current loan balance is $469,000 approximately.
You want to mention also the source of funds on the original loan?
Sure. The initial source of funds was the Edina Spark program, which was a special program that was passed during those pandemic years, whereby there was state legislative authority given to cities to use unallocated TIF monies that had already been paid by the businesses and already collected, but it was in a holding container, essentially. And that special legislation gave the HRA the authority to use those monies to achieve two things: to create jobs and to remodel or build new spaces. So we wanted to make sure that we abided by those terms of the state law. As we modified the loan agreement, we've been discussing this with the chamber for several months. You'll recall we were here in December to get this on your radar. The amendment is, of course, in your packet, and as we negotiated that, we tried to keep it simple to achieve two goals: to make sure the loan could be repaid, and to make sure that that repayment did not unduly hinder the ongoing operations and success of the chamber. So the loan agreement has 8 key points in it. Number 1 is to make sure the loan is repaid in full. We will increase the balance due by about $5,000 to cover our internal legal expenses of preparing these agreements. There's no change in the interest rate. It's at 2%. The biggest change is the extension of the term of the loan from 7 years to 15. There will still be 2 payments each year. We've jockeyed the dates of those to better align with the cash flow of the Chamber of Commerce. So payments will be due in July and December. The Chamber still, of course, is agreeable to work in partnership with other groups and agencies to continue to promote entrepreneurship and business development in Edina. Since the loan is extended, there will be a new requirement for annual reports issued to the HRA so that we can track loan payments, programs of the chamber, et cetera. And in case of default of the loan, the original terms still stand where the HRA has the rights, if we choose, to potentially sublease the space or to take a controlling interest in the space and the facility. Our legal counsel at Dorsey and Whitney prepared the loan amendment, and I certainly recommend that the loan amendment be approved. This morning, we're joined by 3 reps from the Chamber of Commerce, Shelley Loberg, the president, Paul Moody, and Mark Jessen, past president and current president, or past chair and current chair are here as well. All 3 of those folks are very familiar with the operations. They were some of the strongest advocates and cheerleaders when we put this idea forth back in 2022. So they're here this morning to answer any questions you may have. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Right, thank you. I don't know if anyone from the chamber, Ms. Loberg or Mr. Moody or Mr. Jessen was to comment at this point in time with regard to the discussion at the chamber board or the vote that was taken in terms of approving. Okay, just stand for questions if there are any. Yeah, of course. Okay, all right, very good. I'll then turn to my fellow commissioners to see if anybody has any questions about this. Commissioner Risser.
Back in December, when this first came before us, the Innovation Lab was still part of the picture, and it is no longer part of the picture. And at that meeting, it was also made very clear that Explore Edina was going to be part of the solution and be an entity that contributed to paying back the loan. I have spent a lot of time going over information that I've been able to find online and that has been posted, and I'm struck by a couple of things. Throughout this entire process, going back to 2022, Explore Edina has not appeared to be a voice in this, and I keep wondering, why would you move your tourism bureau, your convention bureau from Edinburgh Park to a very expensive office space on Metro Boulevard? It makes no sense to me. And so today, as I sit here, the ask on one hand seems very reasonable and very simple, simply extend the terms. However, what I get hung up on is the statement, the chamber intends to pay it back. Who's paying it back? How much is coming from Explore Edina? And that space is huge. How much of the rent is Explore Edina shouldering now that the Innovation Lab is gone? So if I could get some information on that.
I think, I heard 2 questions in there. Was why the move from Edinburgh, and then also the role of Explore Edina in the payment of rent and the repayment of the loan. So,
yeah.
Ms. Loberg.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that, Council Member Risser. What we have done after some extended discussion with Manager Neal and Bill is that we're not actually able to directly use lodging tax funding in the repayment of the loan in terms of the money coming from the account to you in the repayment terms. So what we have done internally is made a very slight shift in resources, and that is covering, our 2 main expenses that are the largest are, of course, rent and salaries. And so because we do have a more abundant budget in lodging tax, we have decided to make a shift of spending 60% of staff time and resources on Explore Edina marketing campaigns and visibility in the community, and therefore Explore Edina is paying 60% of rent and salaries. That does allow the chamber to create a fund for paying the loan twice annually.
When I look at the original term sheet for back in 2022, it stated very clearly for rent, and back then it was $11,225 per month, so that's a chunk it's probably gone up.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It's more like 11.6 now.
Okay. And it stated very clearly that the lab was going to cover 50% of that, and that the remaining 50% would be split between Explore Edina. And so now Explore Edina is going to be shouldering not 25%, and it sounds like it's been shouldering 50% for quite a while.
That's correct. The lab did not generate revenue to contribute to the rent payments.
Okay, and my concern is it is not the role of our tourism bureau to be financially supporting an enterprise like the Edina Innovation Lab. My understanding is that 95% of the proceeds that come from the lodging tax have to be used for promoting the city as a tourist or convention center.
That is accurate.
Okay, so I'm having a really hard time with this because it sounds like those revenues have been and will continue to be used for something that really, how does Explore Edina benefit from having this space? It doesn't really need it.
Well, first of all, Explore Edina for the last decade has operated as a program of the Chamber of Commerce. So to say that it's not part of our daily operations is inaccurate. It always has been since I was hired. I was originally hired to launch the Visitors Bureau in 2014. And at that time, in our old space, Explore Edina was also paying for half of the rent and salaries, and maybe other people who were on the board at that time can affirm that statement, but that is not a new concept. The Visitor Bureau has always paid for that portion of staff salaries and rent and other operational expenses in the office, like our printer and our telephone and our internet.
Okay, and I did not intend to say that it wasn't part of your program, just to be clear on that. However, my understanding, and going back looking at the documents, when Explore Edina was founded, it was very clear that it needed to have a board and that board needed to be filled with people who were from the hospitality industry.
Correct.
The chamber had a presence and the city had presence. And is there representation? And then at some point, and here I have not found the document or who the body was or the individual who made the call that we're going to merge these boards and create one board.
Right.
We're only going to have one 503c6 or 501. I'm probably saying it wrong.
501c3.
We're going to have only
501c6.
one of those.
Yeah.
Right. And so how many members of the board are now from the hospitality or represent the hospitality industry?
Currently, one.
One? And how many board members do you have?
We have 12 board members.
Okay. My biggest concern is I feel like, were there any members on the board representing the hospitality industry when this grant and this plan to move from Edinburgh was made? I'm sorry, that's kind of a...
Yeah. I want to be a little careful because I was not in the leadership position at the time that decision was made.
Yeah.
But as far as I can recall, the Chamber Board and the Explorer Board were merged thoughtfully and carefully. However, the main stakeholder, if you will, from the hospitality industry that has remained on the board the whole time was a representative from the management company of the Westin. Previously, I know we had at one time the GM of Galleria on our board. We had some restaurant, we had someone from Parasole that was on the board. Other than that, it really was mainly business people, and my impression as an employee was that was always the intent, was not just to flood the boards or board with hospitality representatives, but that it still be in the interest of the entire business community, which obviously includes, retail and hospitality. And that's part of why we developed the Style Edina event, is to really cater to the retail community and to make sure that they continue to have exuberant promotion throughout the year.
I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
I think another thing that could be helpful in this discussion, because of the concerns raised by Commissioner Risser, would be just kind of a backgrounding. When you think about places like Bloomington that have a chamber membership, they had their own chamber for decades probably before they were subsumed in the regional chamber, but they've always had a standalone organization, the Visitor and
Correct.
Convention Bureau, that had its own independent budget and operated solely within the confines of the statute that dealt with this hospitality tax. Our decision was to blend those two, to keep the cost down and to make us more efficient,
That's
as I
correct.
recall. And that was the decision made at the time we were forming it, or, I guess shortly thereafter that we entered into that industry. And then we thought about the lab being added to the picture, and I don't remember exactly what the reasons were that we moved from, or that it was moved from Edinburgh to the present location, but
Yeah,
we needed
again,
the
I was
space.
not part of that
Yeah.
decision either. I did not choose the space. I did not manage the build-out. My promotion to this current position was done in August of 2023. So it's a little bit difficult for me, and maybe some of the other board members can comment on other questions that deal with the choosing of the space, the management of the build-out, because I actually had no active participation in that.
The other thing over the years is that we've had a lot of requests, maybe that's a broad expression, but several requests for use of Explore funds for purposes that those folks thought were community building in nature, and it met the definitions of use of those funds under the statute.
Yeah.
But this has been something that I think we've carefully scrutinized over the years and have determined the appropriate use of those funds. And the way they're being used has been viewed carefully by, I think, our executive director, our city manager, our attorneys. Every time we get a request from somebody saying, how about using some of those Explore Edina funds for this particular purpose, it's really
Yes.
vetted carefully before any decision is made.
Yeah, and I do consider that a personal expertise of mine because I've been in that particular industry around other colleagues and communities for over 15 years.
Other questions? For Ms. Loberg? Yes, Commissioner Jackson.
So Manager Neuendorf said one of the 8 points of the discussions was to promote entrepreneurship in our city, and we're all very sad to lose the Innovation Lab.
Right.
Can you tell us what kind of things you're looking at and how we're going to welcome entrepreneurs into our community?
So the Chamber will continue to look at how we can share resources for businesses, and part of that partnership could involve the Hennepin County program called Elevate, which Mr. Neuendorf is involved in. And so I guess from my personal point of view, everything we do at the Chamber elevates small businesses, so we are already doing that. But I think what we need to do, the intention in the creation of the Innovation Lab was to provide education for established business to grow their operations and sort of reimagine how they might do them more efficiently. And so I think we just need to be careful that we continue to look at resources that are free for the business community that they may not be aware of. And offhand, I would say those two things are SCORE and Elevate. And I'm in active discussions with leaders in both of those organizations so that we can create abundant resources for businesses. And as a chamber member, they'll be more aware of those. So, we'll be doing some outreach to try to make our membership more robust as well.
And are you working with any of the new developments coming into town? We've got a commercial building coming at 7250 France and a commercial building coming at the former Macy's site. And over here, the developer, I can't think of the name of them, and the building on stilts. Opus is coming to town, and that's going to be a commercial building as well. So if you're not already in talks with the developers, it would be great to have a welcome to the businesses that are coming in those three new buildings.
Yes, absolutely.
So, great. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Mr. Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I've got a handful of questions, and probably for both you and Manager Neuendorf. Just to be crystal clear on where we are. So the first one, Mr. Neuendorf, if we don't approve the amendment, then are we looking at just a default on the original loan, those funds?
If we don't approve the amendment, the existing loan agreement would stand. So they're not, I guess we could do default, but under the terms of the original loan agreement, they are past due on their January payment.
Yeah.
So that would need to be rectified. And then also the old amendment mandates that they do the operations of the business lab. And since that has been terminated, we'd have to remedy that. And so both of those could be considered defaults if we chose.
Okay. And in my question, what I have heard so far this morning kind of talks about two things. One is the original structure and the agreement between Explore Edina and the Chamber. And so I'm really asking the question, I use the term default, but there would be some other option that would not be advantageous for the HRA or the city, is what I'm really trying to get at there. And so I think you're saying, yes, you've looked at all of that, and this amendment is one of, if not what you believe to be the best option.
I recommend that this amendment move forward. Yes, I think it achieves the goals of both entities.
Okay. And then another one for you. In the amendment, there's the amortization going from 7 to 15 years. Why the 7 to 15?
That's really the core aspect of this amendment. We've been talking with the Chamber for over a year as we saw some hiccups happening, some things, some of the revenue that we expected to come in was not coming in, and we soon came to the realization that the original loan repayment amount in such a short, abbreviated time could potentially endanger the sustainability of the entire organization. The original loan assumed payments of about $42,000 in January and then in July. And that was assuming that there was a revenue stream coming from the Business Innovation Lab, and that revenue stream was not recognized. And so in order to lessen the burden on the Chamber so they can continue their ongoing operations, the simplest way to do that was to extend the term of repayment. So under the new amendment, the repayment amount is approximately $18,000 in July and December. So it cuts their annual payments in half, which allows them to still keep their ongoing operations.
Okay, thank you. And then this last question really takes into account comments from Commissioner Risser and Commissioner Jackson. So what we're saying is the original loan agreement, we need to restructure that so that it's both, I think, it's a better agreement for the city and the Chamber. And so we've looked at that to address those issues. The 7 to 15 years is one of the key things that allows us, from a cash flow perspective, to structure things differently. Again, more advantageous for the city and the Chamber. And so then my third question, how can we ensure repayment? And so I really like the questions that Commissioner Jackson asked, but I'd like to hear what our plan is to increase revenue so that we can either accelerate repayment or ensure that we could meet the new schedule.
So the shift in use of budget and resources is the key amendment for us as an organization. We are a small organization. It is myself and 2 other full-time employees. At this time, without additional employees, I would not be able to add programming per se. We are operating at absolute maximum capacity. So we will be trying to rent well, first of all, we are housing the Edina Community Foundation, and they are a renter. And so part of our vision is to continue to turn our space into a community space. And that means we will be allowing community organizations to use the space so that it's not sitting idle. And also we will be doing some outreach to fill that 5th office with a renter that will hopefully create some income. And then, we have made some other, I would say, minor shifts within expenses. We have cut expenses. We are looking at cutting accounting expenses. That was one that was pretty significant. So as an organization, we're just looking at ways to be more efficient. That's really just basic, cost cutting and, some additional revenue retention.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of additional things. Make it clear, the lab was never a borrower. It was always the chamber.
That is correct.
And then I think with respect to the conversation we've had up here today, maybe you for sure and possibly board members as well, past chairs, existing chairs, expressing a level of confidence on the repayment based upon the restructuring of the loan. Comment on that.
Thank you. Paul Moody. I was been on the board as board chair a couple of years ago, and was very involved in. Shelley and I worked closely on the budget, going through this and doing a real analysis to see what would realistically work. That's how we came up with the request to change this from 7 to 15 years. And we strongly believe that the budget we have is achievable and that we can pay this back. It is our absolute intention to pay this debt back, and that we don't want to come back here again. We want to present something here. I mean, we wish the lab had worked. It didn't. We've changed course here, and we have a plan to pay this back. And based on everything that we worked on, and it was a fair amount of work and analysis. It wasn't a quick back of the napkin analysis here. So I strongly believe that it can and will be paid back. Am I addressing your question?
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think that's helpful to everybody. Okay. Other questions? All right. Thank you. Our current chair is coming up, current board chair. Oh, would you talk about the vote at the board level too?
Pardon me?
Talk about the vote at the board level.
Yeah, we had a meeting on Tuesday morning, and the board unanimously passed the support of this amended loan. And so everybody was in agreement and supported the work that Paul and Shelley had done with Bill to put this agreement together, and so we're all on board. But I did want to comment on Commissioner Risser's question about how we landed at the E, because I was on the board when we were looking, and we looked at 3 spots. We looked at Pentagon Park. We looked at a Franchou property on 76th in France, and which wasn't too far from where we had already been. It was like just across the street. And then we looked at the E, and when we looked at the 3 of them, there were pluses and minuses with all 3 of them, but I think there was a belief at that time that in order to attract people to the Innovation Lab, potential customers of the Innovation Lab, we needed something a little more technologically based, and the E was really big on technology. And so data was what we were thinking about, technology. also linking that side of town. There's a lot of businesses over on that side, including hospitality, that we thought being over on the west side would help bring into the chamber and the hospitality industry connection with Explore. So that was the logic. That kind of took precedence when we were making those decisions about where to land. For right or for wrong, that was what we were thinking. So,
Thank you, thank you, Chair Justin. Yes, Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, so a follow-up question to that. I had been in the offices in Edinburgh Park, and they were hard to find, and they were very small. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to move?
It was difficult to get to. Parking was challenging. It was not a place that was, again, to your point, easy and high profile. It was kind of hidden. And so we felt like we were tucked away in this corner and not really out and in the business community or the hospitality industry. It just kind of felt like we were landlocked in that particular spot. And also the thought was, with the E, it was really convenient off the highway, easy access in and out, and abundant parking. And to be honest, also there was the idea that we would help with this new building by being an early tenant with this renovation of the former Regis location. So we did want to be part of that as well. But yeah, it was a challenging spot where we were before.
Thank you.
Yep.
As I recall, the chamber office itself was fairly small over there. There was an adjacent conference room, but that was not the chamber's conference room. That was the building's conference room.
Yeah.
So to have the space that was necessary to even function with both Explore and the chamber, you needed more space.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. It wasn't, and with what we were proposing to do with the Innovation Lab, it was not going to work at all. So it wasn't really working well for just the chamber and Explore. It was tight, and so there was an increase in rent, but we also knew we were going to have to take an increase in rent in order to have the right facility for the things that needed to be done, because the previous one wasn't working.
Well, I've got you up here as chair. Mr. Nuendorf mentioned that you were in arrears on the payment of the January payment of $42,000. With the restructuring then, will there be a payment made to cover the January payment, or how do those payments fall in this particular year? Do you know?
We have budgeted now, while working on the amended loan, we worked on our own budget simultaneously so that we're prepared to make the next payment.
And that would be, the first payment would be soon?
Yeah. July.
What was that?
July.
July, okay, all right. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions for Chair Justin? Okay, thank you. All right, so Mr. Nuendorf is recommending, first of all, let me say that Scott Neal and I serve on the board of the chamber in kind of an honorary capacity. On Tuesday morning, I was at the state legislature testifying on our bill that we have in place over there, asking for relief on sales tax on construction materials, equipment, and supplies on our local option sales tax related projects. Manager Neal was at the meeting. Had I been at the meeting, I would have abstained on the vote, and I think you maybe did that as well.
I did not, yes.
Make that clear so that when we talk about unanimous vote, it would have excluded the two of us.
I was at the meeting, answered some questions, but had that abstention.
Okay. So let's go back to the motion at hand, and that is a recommendation from our Economic Development Director that we approve the Second Amendment to the drawdown loan agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves. Commissioner Pierce seconds the motion to approve the Second Amendment to the drawdown loan agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce. Any further discussion? Yes, Member Risser. Commissioner Risser.
I want to say this is really probably one of the hardest votes for me, because on the one hand, we have $469,000, and what is the right thing to do? We need to get those funds back. However, as I listen and I think about the math, and I look at that 25% that Explore Edina was supposed to be responsible for, and I look at the founding documents and how there's supposed to be representation from the hospitality industry, and 1 out of 12 really is not a lot. And I also hear and I understand the logic of saying we can be more efficient if we blend these two organizations, but we've got statute 469.190, subdivision 3. It says 95% of the gross proceeds from any tax imposed on the lodging tax must be used to fund marketing and promoting the city as a tourist or convention center. And so I've really wrestled with this, and I really feel for where we are. I feel like we're kind of painted into a corner. One thing, I hope we can learn from this. We dedicated $800,000 to renovating space in a rental location, and that was something banks wouldn't do. And I really hope we never do that kind of loan again. So I just want to say that this is probably the hardest vote for me. But anyhow, I just wanted to get that out.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Jackson?
So I don't know, Manager Neal, whether you can answer this question or not, or if it goes to Shelley Loberg, but the chamber or the Explore Edina is still legally operating within its constraints on how the funds are used, correct? They're not in violation of the law.
That's correct. The city receives the funds directly from the hoteliers. We take our 5% off to cover our admin costs for the implementation of the tax. We remit the rest of it to the chamber. When we have our monthly board meetings, we often discuss what's eligible and what's not eligible in terms of costs that we can attribute to lodging tax revenue. As you might imagine, this definition gets pushed really hard all over the state, but there are some accepted norms within state government about how we spend that money, and one of them is that it is acceptable to spend an appropriate amount or a pro rata amount on overhead costs of providing tourism related services. So that's where that's how it is justified that the Explore Edina can use lodging funds to share some of the operating costs, but not all of the operating costs.
Okay, so bottom line, they're operating within the limits of the law.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Loberg, this is your area of expertise. Once you come back up here too and reinforce that notion that Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, as you read the statute, it's obviously very straightforward, but the other obvious statement, as Manager Neal just eloquently expressed, is that any visitor bureau, whether it is a standalone bureau or part of another organization, whether it's the city or a chamber of commerce, has to have operational costs. And so the 95% that we receive is in fact lawfully being spent, and annually you are all given a presentation by me on the percentages of what are operational expenses versus marketing expenses. So they are lawful.
Yeah, thanks for that supplemental information. I think it was helpful. Manager Neal, any other comments?
No.
Or Commissioner Risser, any follow-on?
No.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the Second Amendment to the drawdown agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce. We've completed the discussions. All those in favor of adoption of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. The motion is adopted. The Second Amendment to the drawdown and loan agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce is approved. Thank you. Executive Director comments. That was our only action item of the day.
I have no other comments for today.
All right. HRA member comments? Anything?
We will be hearing tornado sirens today because it is severe weather awareness week. So just wanted to get that.
The other thing I would just note quickly, I think this afternoon from 3 to 5 is kind of the farewell party for Stacey Stanley. So folks should think about that as well. Anything else? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, well, I got to attend a movie at the Edina, or the Minnesota, the SPIF, I have to think what it is. It's the Minnesota St. Paul International Film Festival here in Edina. It was super exciting to go over there, and there was a greeter at the door, and I'm so thankful that we were able to participate in the film festival, and it was a great movie too. So,
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves that we adjourn, and Commissioner Pierce seconds that motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The HRA for the City of Edina stands adjourned this Thursday, April 10, 2025 at 8:17 a.m.